All right, let's go ahead and talk about the CFP. Heather Dennis did a great article over at ESPN. She says a 16-team college football playoff model featuring the top 5 conference champions and 11 at-large teams is gaining traction following SEC spring meetings this week. But the next step in playoff expansion for 26 and beyond will depend on how quickly the sports leaders can make a flurry of decisions. Says a critical component is the SEC's choice between staying at 8 league games or moving to 9, a topic ACC sources say could be revisited in their league after years of being dormant if prompted by playoff expansion. The linchpin to those scheduling decisions is one thing every conference seems to agree on: the need for clarity about how the CFP Selection Committee ranks its teams, starting with how strength of schedule is determined and applied. Now, that's one big thing the SEC, today, after their week of meetings, the SEC went around handing out basically a booklet explaining why the SEC is so superior to everybody else in strength of schedule. And Greg Sankey did, I think it was on the Paul Feinbaum show, maybe. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. He went on and said, hey, we've got to make sure changes are done to the committee. If we go to this 5-11 model, basically, we've got to make sure that the criteria makes sense on how they choose the teams. So basically, the SEC whining because they have one team get left out 1 year, and they're crying about the selection committee's picks. Alabama lost to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, 2 average football teams in their conference. Don't lose to average football teams, and you make it. If you win one of those games, Alabama, you're in. Don't lose the games, man. And the year before that, Alabama got selected over top of Florida State, but you don't hear Greg Sankey talk about that, do you? You don't hear Greg Sankey talk about how Alabama should not have gotten in the previous year, and it should have been Florida State who won a power conference undefeated. So they want to whine and cry when it doesn't go their way one time. One friggin' time. Any other year, it usually goes their way. But anyway, I digress. That's a whole nother tangent I could go on. But he wants changes done. So it looks like this 5+11 model is gaining steam even in SEC circles. Now, remember, it was actually the Big Ten who originally proposed the 4 automatic qualifiers for the 2, for the SEC and Big Ten. It was not the SEC who proposed that. They were open to it. They discussed it, but it was the Big Ten's idea. So it looks like, Greg, it's possible that the Big Ten and SEC may not agree here. We've heard SEC coaches come out in favor of a 5+11. Coaches want to earn it on the field, man. And even the Big 12's come out in favor of this. The Big 12, who might actually stand to lose from a 5+11 format because they may only get in their 1 automatic qualifier every year, or at least most years. We could see 5, even 6 Big Ten and SEC teams getting into the playoffs in a lot of years. That's not good for the Big 12 and the ACC, but they see the value in earning your spot, not just giving it away because you're in a certain conference. That is not what sports is built on. Sports is built on competition, and that's one of the reasons I think the 5+11 model is the right model. It might not be the best for the Big 12, at least not today, but I think it's better for the sport. Your conference champion automatically gets in. It still means winning the conference matters. It still means the regular season matters. You win your league, you're in, more than likely. Top 5 ranked conference champs will get an automatic bid. That more in most years will be the Big 12. The Big 12 champion will be one of those teams. I like that. It also gives the Big 12 opportunities to earn another spot or two, depending on how their teams do. Now, the parity in the Big 12 where these teams like to beat up on each other, it's going to make it difficult. There's going to be a lot of 2 and 3 loss teams in the Big 12 most years. But hey, who knows? Maybe we see 1 or 2 teams become more dominant over the next few years, right? And we see a team, we see a Clemson-like run by a team. Not saying they win multiple national championships, but you get my point. Maybe we see a team or 2 or 3 in the Big 12 kind of separate themselves above everyone else over the next few years. Maybe that happens. And if that's the case, then maybe the Big 12 can get multiple teams in the playoff. But how do you know? I mean, we've only had a 12-team format 1 year. They're already going to be moving to 16 teams in 26, more than likely, or at least 14 teams. I mean, my gosh. Let's let this thing play out for a few more years before we just start changing everything and giving these conferences automatic qualifiers. It makes no sense to do that, in my opinion. It just flies in the face of what sports is supposed to be about. It's not a they shouldn't be giving participation trophies to fifth and sixth place teams in leagues. If you're a fifth or sixth place team, you shouldn't be able to play a play-in game to get in the CFP. I think that's hogwash and ignorant. But hopefully the 5+11 model is the one they'll go with. Here's a quote from Greg Sankey. He says, "I do think there's a need for change," end quote. How do you make those decisions? It's hard, and we trust the committee to do that, and I respect the people in there. So this isn't a criticism of the people. This is wanting to understand the decisions. We have to have better clarity on the criteria that inform those decisions, end quote. It says, currently strength of schedule is one of several factors not weighed in the committee's ambiguous protocol. Language the FBS commissioners wrote at the inception of the 14 playoff in 2014. There's a sense among some athletic directors in the SEC and ACC that moving to 9 conference games is feasible if the committee doesn't penalize teams for losing 2 or 3 games against strong opponents. But basically, the push from the SEC now at the end of their meetings is, hey, let's clarify the criteria. They're wanting to put a major focus on strength of schedule. Well, of course they are, because that's going to benefit them in most years, right? Because they feel like their conference has the toughest strength of schedule. And in most years, that's true. I'm not going to argue that. But that might not be the case 5, 6, 7 years from now. We don't know that. I don't like predicting the future based on the past. I don't think you should do that in sports. You should earn it. And if the SEC continues to dominate the way they have in previous years, then so be it. They dominate. But let's not forget, they haven't had a team in a national championship game for the last 2 years, right? It was Michigan, TCU, and then, that was 3 years ago. We saw Michigan beat Washington, and then we saw Ohio State beat Notre Dame, right? So we haven't seen an SEC team in the national championship game since Georgia beat TCU 3 seasons ago. So, yeah, SEC, maybe they're not as dominant as they think they are. But, we've seen, it looks like most of the leagues, we haven't heard the Big Ten because they don't talk to the media, which is baffling to me. But we pretty much all the conferences outside of the Big Ten want the 5+11 model. So looks like there is it's definitely leaning in that direction. And again, the main reason I think it's a good idea, because you went earning on the field. I think it's best for the sport. Now, there are a couple other reasons I think it's a good idea. And I'm gonna pull up. I posted on Twitter about this the other day, and I can't remember exactly how I worded it. But I was going to pull up the reasons I think. Well, I don't see it now, but anyway, there are a lot of reasons why I think but the main one is just it's best for the sport. I think it's the way to go. And also, you don't want to sign away. Oh, one of the reasons was you don't want to sign away. If you're the Big 12, you don't want to basically make it official in writing and codify that your conference is only half as good as 2 of the other power conferences. Do you really want to do that? You're setting yourself up for precedent that can be used against you in recruiting. Shout out to Paul Catalina over at 365 Sports for bringing that up on his show today. They can use it against you in recruiting. It's automatically going to give them a larger share of the college football playoff money, which they're already getting anyway. So, I mean, the automatic qualifiers would, because it's based on how many teams you get in. So they would automatically be setting themselves up to automatically get that much more money every year on top of the additional money they're already getting. So that's another reason that I think you don't want to go to automatic qualifiers. The recruiting piece, and you don't want to just say, hey, we admit we're only half as good as these other leagues. You don't want to do that, especially when you're in the Power Four. Heck, even the G5s don't want to do that. This is athletic competition here. You can't just automatically give up and say, hey, yeah, we're not as good as you. You take 4 spots. That makes 0 sense to me. Now, if it's forced on you and you're forced to do the 4-4-2-2-1 model and you get 2 AQs, you take it. And you're probably not super bummed about it, but you take it. Because you're going to get at least those 2 spots every year. So anyway, that's the reasons I like the 5-11 model. Primary reasons. It's just it's the best thing for the sport, and I still think it gives the Big 12 an opportunity to earn spots in the playoff. There are going to be some years they'll get 2 teams in. There might be years they'll get 3 teams in. Who knows? But I think they'll get 1 every year, and a lot of years they'll get 2. Last year they would have only gotten 1 because BYU and Iowa State were just on the outside looking in. I think they were ranked around 17, 18 or 18, 19, somewhere in there. But that's not going to be the case every year. There will be a lot of years you'll have 2 teams, 2 Big 12 teams inside the top 16, or even 3 teams inside the top 16. So I'm all for the 5+11 model, at least right now. At least right now. Like I said, run through the 2031 cycle, see how it goes, and then if you need to change it in 2031, change it in 2031. But don't be changing it only 1 year in. My gosh, give it time to breathe. Give it time to breathe. Oh, another reason I didn't. Here's the other reason that I think the 5-11 model works even for the Big 12 is because the money factor. If you do the automatic qualifiers, if you give the SEC and Big 10 those 4 automatic qualifiers, that sets them up to start scheduling non-conference games against each other. Now, they could do that anyway, but there's less incentive to do it if you don't give them the AQs, right? They won't play, and then because if they do that, that's even more TV money they're going to make in it, more than you're making, right? They're already beating you by 40, 50 million a year. They're going to make even more if they play each other in the non-con. And if that happens, they might stop playing teams in the Big 12 and ACC outside of maybe a few rivalry games. You don't want that to happen if you can help it. So that's another reason. And it sets up the play-in games where, like I mentioned earlier, where you have, the 3rd place team in the SEC playing the 6th place team to see who gets that third and 4th spot. You got the 4th place team and 5th place team. And again, that's more meaningful games for the SEC and more TV money they could get. Whereas the Big 12 wouldn't have as many of those opportunities, or the ACC either for that matter. So it just gives them the opportunity to widen that financial gap even more. So financially, you don't want the SEC and Big 10 to widen the gap anymore. B, they can use it on you in recruiting because you're automatically admitting that you're only half as good as them. And reason 3, it's just best for the sport to earn your way into the playoff. And yes, I know the SEC and Big 10 have some built-in advantages that will help them do that. But man, I don't know what else you do at this point. You've got to punch above your weight class if you're the Big 12. You've got to earn it. You've got to just prove people wrong. You've got to have that chip on your shoulder, and you've got to go out and you got to win football games, and you earn your way in. It's the American way, man. And it's the Big 12 way, in my opinion. Teams in the Big 12 ought to be accustomed to having to do that. It's kind of what the league's built on. That chip on the shoulder, us against the world mentality, to me is the Big 12. So go out and use that to your advantage.